All right, we're back. René, Guénon, The Crisis of the Modern World, Part 2. I know right now I'm only pumping out these videos probably once a month, maybe once every 2 months, but I'm working really hard at a restaurant to afford a down payment on a house so I can have a small farm to make these videos on with some nice little animals, and it'll be a nice place for me to keep pushing myself philosophically while working on the master's degree so I can help addicts get sober. That's all I really want to do, is just help addicts get sober, start a family, and educate people with these videos, because I think like I've talked about, I don't see myself pursuing graduate degrees in philosophy. I'm not quite happy with where academia is right now. So, right now we'll finish this Guénon. We're going to do more Guénon, the symbolism of the cross. We're going to do, some more Evola, some more traditionalists, and then Heidegger, and then we might move into some American transcendentalists and maybe some more Catholic philosophers. But right now we're on chapter 6, called The Social Chaos. Guénon says, social and political movements, like modern philosophy, are nothing more than outward signs of the mentality of a time period. This kind of goes like Heidegger's concept of world, right? These movements are just showing the outward signs of the mentality of people, just like you could say art shows the world that people inhabit in a Heideggerian sense. Castes and hierarchies no longer exist, and nothing is in the place it should be. Nowadays, people find work they can get. They are not placed by skills or purpose. We no longer live in a system where your grandpa was a tailor, your dad was a tailor, you're a tailor, you have hundreds of years of tailor experience behind you in the form of your ancestors. Now you are just taking whatever labor the American system needs at the time. They need a bunch of software developers, so they push a bunch of people into software development colleges. And you get what society needs, not what the community needs. You get what the hierarchy needs. The only hierarchy, which is your rulers. Even when Guénon was writing, people were being placed in society by equality, not skills or purpose. Equality does not exist for two things, cannot be equal, but also distinct. Guénon says much of the egalitarian theories are causing much social confusion today. I don't need to get into that. You all see it around you. I'm not going to sit here and do cultural critic right now. Equality and progress are nothing more than lay dogmas and suggestions that rose in the 18th century. Before the 1700s, around the 1750s, to think that everything was equal, to think that everything was moving in one direction, progress, as if somehow lobotomies and phrenology and cutting off children's genitals with trans surgeries is progress. We've reached a place where if you just slap that progress label on anything, supposedly it's progress now. In a couple weeks we'll probably have people look at Canada. I was gonna make a joke, but look at Canada. Literally 5% of their population is dying in euthanization tubes. They're literally putting these people in suicide tubes. We push you in a society that causes mental health issues. You want to kill yourself, we replace you with Indians and migrants. Okay. Just remember, the purpose of a system is what it does. It is not easy to judge the sincerity of those propagators of such ideas. Often dupes are the best instruments, but Guénon believes at the top there must be people who are smart pushing these ideas. Guénon notices men are no longer fulfilled in their proper function, which is odd in such a time of specialization. He says this is the natural outcome of democratic conceptions of societies who believe power comes from below, and which brings with it the destruction of competence. When democracy thinks that the people, the lowest common denominator, should be making societal changes, you get a lot of problems with that. Because no longer are the competent and the elite people making decisions. We are getting led by the lowest common denominators. So it's especially sad in a place like America when we're at a place where 30% of the vote is coming from foreigners who live here now, who have been in the country for less than 40 years, and a lot of them don't even speak English. Okay, our country is being decided on, the route of our country is being decided on by people who don't even speak the language sometimes. It's, some would call that ludicrous if you weren't a fucking moron. But, giving the, what I call, intentional destruction of the education system in America, moron is what most would be. Sad but true. Alright, the argument against democracy is as stated: the higher cannot proceed from the lower, because the greater cannot proceed from the lesser. The same can be said for modernity. Democracy claims to be government by the people themselves, but one cannot be ruled and a ruler at the same time. The power of a leader is the modern world the power of a leader in the modern world is the ability to make people think they are ruling themselves, okay? The problem also being, if only a few elite possess knowledge, then any opinion of the majority cannot be anything but an expression of incompetence. We see this with modern philosophers who say truth is just universal consent. This is a philosophy pushing the democratic theory. Okay, these are postmodernist types who say that truth is not objectively out there, but truth is something that is just a consensus. Which, I see what they're saying, and I still am in the midst of struggling with the objective versus subjective truth thing. Because when you live in a society where everyone did think that lobotomies were some psychological breakthrough that really was curing people, and for a good 50 years there, lobotomies were looked at as scientific truth. So even in the realm of science, it is hard to argue against the people who say that truth is just consent. Democracy is another form of material multiplicity, where in the spiritual world there is only unity and wholeness. Once a community is based on this, then a community and its laws are based on that of greatest numbers, not that of higher principles, but greatest number of incompetent knowledge. So, if you shove a bunch of Somalians in Minneapolis, and they all vote for nothing but giving Somalians more money and letting Somalians fraud Minnesotans out of billions of dollars through Feed Our Future and autism scandals, that becomes a problem. You are now just being ruled by incompetence, which is a bunch of inserts, horrible insult here. And finally, the problem is democracy denies the existence of an elite. That's why it is opposed to aristocracy. Democracy sacrifices the minority for majority, quality to quantity, and elite to the masses. And the problem with that is, I shouldn't even have to say it. The problem is, if you have a bunch of migrants or low IQ people, this goes for whites, black Americans, either of them, if you have a bunch of them living on government aid and having 8 children while all the smart people are working 50 hours a week and only have 1 or 2 children, then obviously your democratic system is going to be made up of nothing but a bunch of low IQ people who can just outbreed you. Basically, Guénon predicted the movie Idiocracy 100 years earlier. It's funny. Even in the modern world, our elites are built upon relative points of superiority, wealth, which is based on quantity of money, not quality of thought. This is why even those who claim to be against modernity come up with no solution, because their ideas will be based off egalitarianism and individual and not higher principles, individualism, not higher principles. The only way out would be the restoration of sacred intellectuality in the elite, which is, I would say, the traditional project of traditionalism. We want to create a world where things are now sacred. Things in the world are not just looked at as materialistic objects, but divine, sacred objects. And that intellectuality is actually a thing. Okay, it turns out in Minnesota, half the class is just ESL now. When you go to school in Minnesota, I'm homeschooling my kids, or I'm moving out of the state. When 50% of your class is just nothing but fat, obese, white, liberal teachers who came from rich parents, teaching kids that the most important thing is to not be racist while you're being replaced in your own country. The most important thing isn't philosophy of the Western canon, it's not mathematics, it's not science. It's just how do we deal with these feelings of alienation now that you're being replaced and no one in your classroom even speaks English. So now not only are you being replaced by people who hate you and the government's giving them a bunch of money so they can out-reproduce you, but you actually have to not feel any anxiety or depression about that. So we're going to take 50% of our class just to calm your nerves on that. And we're not going to actually teach you anything. We're just going to make you be okay with being replaced in our new little gay race communism system. You know, real quick aside. You know, I got a buddy who, he's a teacher, and he said the principal brought in a guest speaker, and it was a gay Hispanic man who sat there just talking about how stupid Americans were. That is America right now. Is a bunch of gay Hispanic people moving to your country to get a bunch of money from your taxes just to insult you. And clown world, am I right? All right. Had to go inside and get another cigarette real quick. Chapter 7, a material civilization. Guénon says, Western civilization is now completely materialistic, and now the origin of the word materialism comes from Berkeley, and it has changed now, the definition that we use. What Berkeley meant by materialism is a scientific theory that accepts the existence of matter. That was all it was, okay? But now, when we say materialistic or materialism, we're thinking about nothing exists but matter and its derivatives. So the word has changed since Berkeley's time. But the view that materialistic things matter over spiritual things, when an exclusively materialistic science is taught and claims to be the only science possible, then that civilization could become nothing but materialist. If you have an education system that teaches that there's no difference between sacred and profane science, which we've talked about and we'll talk about when we talk about Wolfgang Smith and Mircea Eliade, how could your society be any different? If you don't teach anything beyond materialism in your academic institutions, then obviously those generations are going to grow up believing in nothing like that. Most people don't think more about anything than what their teacher tells them. I mean, look at this new generation of white chicks that we see. You have a bunch of Israeli feminists teaching them to hate white men and that marriage is slavery, and they just gobble it up. They don't even think about it. They don't look at the sources of who's telling them that. They don't think, maybe, is there a social agenda here? Maybe society's just pushing feminism so hard so they can get 50% more workers and tax money. No, none of that ever crosses their mind. They just think we are now on a holy jihad mission to destroy the white men. And it's not just women. I was just using that as an example. Most people don't think about what's taught in their academic systems. They just think, well, this person with a PhD, this rich white chick whose dad paid for her entire college experience and her rent and her groceries. You know, this woman obviously has a lot of lived experience and is a very intellectual person because they have a couple letters in front of their name that their dad paid for. It means nothing if you really think about it. Modernists claim anything unseen/touched is unknowable. You know, there can't be metaphysics, there can't be theology, there can't be God because it's unseen. There's no evidence. I need evidence. I need to be able to see this through a microscope for it to exist. Well, except for racism, right? That's just in the ether. Racism and sexism. You don't need to see or touch that. That's just obvious. Duh. Claims spiritualism and idealism is transposed materialism. Both are born from a Cartesian philosophy. Idealism and materialism are the same practically, Guénon says. I'm not going to get too much into that, but there's actually a lot of literature behind that. Very interesting philosophical dispute. whether idealism is just another form of materialism. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but I can see where Guénon is coming from. Modern people cannot conceive of a science measured, counted, or weighed. This even applies to psychology. Modern people cannot conceive of a science not based around what's measured, counted, or weighed. This even applies to psychology, which you would think would exclude such methods. Even the thought that something is measurable comes from a quality inherent in matter. Indefinite divisibility. To think you can find this in everything is the same as materializing everything. Even when modern people, religious people included, speak of reality, they mean what's real in the sensible word, not spiritual. Even common sense is that which is based to the practical and pragmatic sense world, okay? This is kind of him just explaining, even religious people, like he's talked about, Christians kind of just act like modern people nowadays, especially in the Western world. If something can't be seen or measured in the real world, it does not exist. Okay, that's just quote-unquote common sense, right? The materialistic world has reduced science to nothing more than a practical tool for industry. Humans have become such slaves to industry-driven science, we have become machines ourselves. Specialization has turned scholars, workers, and technicians into nothing more than a limb to a bigger societal machine. People are no longer Renaissance men. They don't read philosophy. They don't read theology. I mean, I have cousins who work in engineering, and it's all they know. Which is fine. It's great, but it doesn't mean you have now just become literally a part of this bigger machine. Your entire knowledge, everything inside your head, there is no bigger picture to your thinking. It is now just, I am a tool for this industry, for this society. No longer, most people, there's that funny meme, it's like a guy dancing and it says, my ethics going out the window when Lockheed Martin offers me a $300,000 job. You know what I mean? $300,000 a year job. It is no longer about the bigger picture. It is just what can be measured in my bank account. Sad, very sad. I got into psychology to help people get sober. I don't care about the money. I will buy a $150,000 farm and rebuild it myself and, raise my family there. I don't care about owning $1 million house in the suburbs. I don't give a shit. I don't fucking give a shit. I don't. I care about helping people and using my knowledge to be able to transform the world into a better place. You can take your $300,000 fucking job working for a weapons manufacturer and shove it up your fucking ass, dude. I don't give a fuck. The problem is finding women who think the same and aren't also materialistic fucking Israel slaves. That seems to be the problem where we're at now. Because Guénon says the materialistic economies and perfecting of engines of war should have been enough to shatter the pacifist dreams of some modernist progress. Even the idea of an armed nation as opposed to the trained fighters fighting wars is a sign of quantitative society. Thinking numbers win fights and not intellectually trained fighters. Modern men hold technology to the point that they have no idea how it works. This proves the worthlessness of its explanatory power. If we do not get a hold of this tech, it will be our downfall. This is obviously, we can get into AI, get into all of that. Basically what he's saying is when you look at a TV, you don't know how this TV works. You don't know the science behind it. But this TV literally guides your life. It guides all the principles that you have. I mean, there's that joke, like left-wingers, their entire political and historical knowledge comes from nothing but TV, media. It's true to a certain extent. It's fucking sad, but it's true, dude. And right-wingers too, but I truly believe when you live in a society like America where every musician, every actor, I mean, even the news stations, there's one Republican news station, Fox News, and it's owned by a Jewish guy, and it's basically controlled opposition. Let's be real. Let's be fucking real about Fox News. Guénon says it's not only the inherent danger, but the amount of energy we spend to get almost little welfare increase. This is obvious, if any at all. We've gotten to the point where even people who want to avoid modernity's technology and speed can't. We see this with technology as well as philosophy, LGBTQ, and women rights. The West needs to push it on everyone. These egalitarians see the need to push it in the name of superiority. This is like, Islamic, intervention. Well, look how they treat women, look how they treat gay people. We need to push our liberal democracy on them because we're so much better, we're so much smarter. We've lost all tradition, all sense of God, so we need to save these poor women and gay people and push modernity and TVs and cell phones and democracy onto all of these people. So basically then we can use the technology and control to make sure our guy who's pro-Western, technological advancements is elected democratically, as in we've controlled all the news that the Middle Eastern people can get that only shows our guy in a good light. This is why the West even uses moral means to push itself on others. Like I just said, the LGBT and the women's rights. We need to invade these countries because the poor women. The West can't tolerate others wanting little or working little or humans not working. So these ideologies must be pushed on other cultures because we need these cultures. We need these cultures to have women's rights because women's rights means 50% more workers. It means 50% more tax money. It means 50% more progress. Progress, yay. Why be happy with your family at home when you can be a slave to capitalism? Even materialistically, it seems the more a man wants and needs, the less happy he is. Society creates more and more artificial needs. You now need to cut your dick off. You now need SSRIs. You now need all of these things, or you will not be happy. The equality needs for equality, this material inequality. I don't know what the fuck I just wrote there. Hold on a second. Oh, okay. The egalitarian needs for equality plus this material inequality will lead to its destruction. Literally saying that the more people you make and the more you say, well, they need to be materialistic equally, you cannot keep that up forever. I mean, even in America, they always say tax the rich, but and I'm not defending rich people, I'm just saying we're at a point where even if you tax all the rich, that can't even figure out the school loan crisis in this country by taking all of the rich people's money. Okay, you take all the rich people's money, we're still $40 trillion in debt. Okay, there needs to be more than just materialistic inequality for what's going to help us. Jesus said, if his house is divided, it cannot stand. The modern West is not Christian. It is anti-religious in general. It has become secular post-World War II. You can try to deny that, but I think that's ridiculous. Finding latent tradition in Catholicism is the last hope for the West. We will try to work on the revitalization of Catholicism, try to kick the communism and liberalism out of Catholicism, and that's the only chance. I disagree with people who say that we can rebuild paganism into a real movement, and there are based right-wing pagans, but I'm going to be honest, most pagans I've met, and I'm a little biased because I'm from Minnesota, so selection bias isn't great, but every pagan I've met is basically just a LGBTQ plus hippie retard. Okay, they're not some far right-wing Varg Virkanez based guy, they're just a fucking hippie, and it's just whatever, dude. It's what the fuck ever. Chapter 8, Western encroachment. Encroaching on the East, that's what we do. We're up in your shit. Guénon says, Easterners who study in Western universities are starting to push modernity from within on the East. Even Easterners who claim to be fighting the West are using Western methods and are no better, like Ilhan Omar. Sorry, I'm from Minnesota, I had to do it. Alright, what he's saying is, like we see in Minnesota, something like 20% of the University of Minnesota, their population is Chinese students. Chinese students who come here to study, and then what Guénon is saying that he lived in Egypt, not China, so I don't know if this is 100% true, but what he's saying is that these Easterners will then leave our universities to go home, and even though they claim to be fighting modernity, they're using Western methods that were invented through modernity. So they're no better than these people. This was Evola's critique of Nazis and fascists, that they became too much like the modern forces they were trying to stop, therefore they were no better. How can they be any better? Will the East have to fall with the West? Guénon doesn't know. The traditional spirits will not die. It is above death and change, but it can withdraw, meaning the end of our world. The traditional Catholic spirit may withdraw from the West and never come back, and it may be our end if it doesn't come back. The West is pushing materialism and anti-traditional outlook on everyone. Only the gullible or satanic, the Hebrew word for one who turns things upside down, have an interest in pushing would deny this. So Guénon says only gullible, stupid people are pushing modern materialism and anti-traditionalism. So me, when I was younger, essentially, I was 16 through 24, I was this far, this atheistic materialist pushing this. I grew up, I realized more things about the world. Or satanic people who have a vested interest, fiscally to push this. Guénon attacks Henry Massey's defense of the West, saying it represents Westerners fighting against Easterners trying to impose contemplation on the West, which Guénon says is needed, and I agree. I don't know who Henry Massey is, but I remember when I read this, he does dedicate like 4 or 5 pages to this whole critique. If you want to read it, read it. I don't know enough about Henry Massis to really get into this. But he says, he does this to show, even in our defense of the West, there is a dissatisfaction, and shows that there are only 2 Western people left, the gullible or the guileful. I forgot he wrote that. Chapter 9, some conclusions. And then I got 2 more pages here, we'll wrap this video up. Guénon gives advice to what the changing of the modern world back to the traditional might look like, ruled by the elites. If the elites could be formed in time, the disruption would be minimal, but what the most important task is conserving the elements of tradition. This work is not wasted because the elites will draw on this, and it will be greatly helpful for humanity in the long run. Guénon says if the West doesn't join in the conservation work, it will be the end and the future will not need us. I'll save my comments for the end. The initiation of the elites will come in 2 ways. Westerners would have to find the means to return to tradition, or Eastern knowledge would have to influence through a second-hand influence, a restoration. Guénon thinks number 2 is more likely. I disagree. I think number 2 would have been more likely if the internet never existed. I think the internet existing is giving Westerners an outlook to be able to communicate with each other, an outlook to be able to organize and return. We see the return of the land project in Arkansas. It's the internet is giving us the means in which we can come together and push a traditional spirit. When the only means of communication 50 years ago or 100 years ago in Guénon's time was newspapers or TVs that were owned and controlled by these satanic elite trying to push the anti-traditional outlook, there wasn't much we could do but hope that the East would intervene and come help us. But I think the internet, if it isn't destroyed by censorship and propaganda bots, is giving us the means to find a way to return to tradition. Guénon thinks the Catholic Church has enough tradition to restore the doctrine, but its representatives are unaware of its unity with other traditions. Catholics must go back to its state before modernity, though. We must have pre-Vatican II, for sure, Catholicism, with adaptations for the time period. Okay? The one quality the Church must get over is its proselytism. I think that's what that word says. I'm sorry, sometimes I can't read my own handwriting. The one quality the Catholic Church must get over is its proselytism and admit it has spiritual allies that are not subjects. Guénon thinks it's unlikely for this movement to happen without the Church's direct involvement. Okay. what it's saying is the Catholic Church needs to realize not all of its spiritual allies are just subjects. So a lot of them can have things to say that will help it, and it needs to listen to these people. These people are telling us that this post-Vatican II church has made a lot of mistakes. They need to start listening to these people. Okay? During this phase, those trying to reintroduce tradition must stand firm against the demon forces of modernity, the demonic forces of modernity, the satanic forces of modernity. They need to go. They got to go. One of the greatest being neo-spiritualism. Even Christ said, "For fake Christs and false prophets shall arise, and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elite." Neo-spiritualism, we've talked about this in the first thing. It's all these Scientology, hippie movements, all these new traditions that show themselves as transcendent movements, even the neo-paganism movements, what I just talked about, the LGBTQ pagans, they gotta go. Even in my opinion, I hate to say it, but the far-right pagans who do nothing but talk shit about Christianity and sow division, they seem like they gotta go. And I don't have any problem with these far-right wing pagans, but they seem to be doing more harm than good. Even Hitler himself said religion is not something we should squabble about. We need to focus on these new movements that save our culture before we worry about religion and what gods we are focusing on. But that could be wrong, because that seems like, once again, you're focusing on the materialistic before the spiritual, and maybe Hitler was wrong about that. Easily could have been. We must watch also for those who think merely philosophical or scientific knowledge will lead to pure intellect. Basically, the entire point of the book, that transcendent knowledge is needed and not just philosophical or scientific knowledge. It is not the number of those who overcome these obstacles, because quantity doesn't matter in the spiritual realm, only modernity. There could be one man who breaks through this transcendent knowledge and is able to fix these problems. We don't need, although we want everyone to be on the same wavelength, and Evola will get into this and I'll get into this, but we need a spiritual reawakening for a real political movement. Temporary despair, confusion, and darkness that creates disequilibrium will only contribute to overall equilibrium. Nothing can prevail against truth. Vincent Omnia Veritas. Okay? What I want people to take away from this book is essentially what we'll be talking about more with Evola in Orientations and Men Amongst the Ruins. What we need in the West is a spiritual transformation. The Western materialistic modern outlook is no longer doing us good, and we need to move on to something different. It's been 300 years. It's not working out. I'm sorry. Okay? And I'm not here to tell you, I'm newer to Catholicism. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm the great spiritual teacher. My background's in philosophy. Go to church, figure that out with a spiritual leader, a traditional Catholic church. Figure it out. I'm going to end this video like I'll end every video. Young men out there, Westerners, I hope the best for you. Stay sober, find God, and always sign a prenup. Okay? These are 3 things you're going to need in life right now. That is what we need. Have children. Teach them about God. Teach them also the intellectual paths. But the big 3. Find God, stay sober, sign a prenup.